production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Fewer gun restrictions, local spending, the election, and much more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by a roundtable of journalists, starting with Laura Faith Cabetta from Chalkbeat. Thanks for being here again.
Absolutely.
Toby Sells from the Memphis Flyer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Karanja Janaku from the Tri-State Defender. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. Let's start with the legislative session, which is in full steam ahead. A lot going on. We are early in the session, so there's always this strange dynamic at the beginning of the session. A lot of bills are filed. Some have legs, some have momentum, some don't. One that does seem, and I'll start with you, Toby, one that does seem to have some real momentum, the governor is pushing it, is some changes to gun restrictions and gun laws. Your thoughts?
Major changes, major overhauls. A permitless gun carry law. You could go into any store and buy a gun and wear it on your person that day. Governor Lee is pushing it this session. You can do it without a permit. He said that the move goes back to the Founding Fathers and the Second Amendment was how the only way he framed it. I didn't see any other references to public safety or any of those other things. Probably goes back to that good guy with a gun mentality. The Republicans up there said that, and the gun carry law would be for those 21 and older. Republicans said it was a great day for citizens and a great day for law enforcement, but almost as soon as the bill was introduced, law enforcement officials from across the state really lambasted this bill, said it's not going to make anything safer. It's not going to make people safer. MPD Director Mike Rawlings said that it was because of a similar legislation that allowed guns in cars a few years ago that has increased gun violence in Memphis to the rate where it is now, and Lee's bill is only going to make it worse. Yeah,
and we've heard that. We've had Amy Wyrick on, the local district attorney, Mike Rawlings, we've had Floyd Bonner, the sheriff, on talking about all kinds of criminal justice issues, and I think the mayor, many people have pointed to that expansion of your right to have a gun in your home carried over to the car, that they say increased the gun availability of guns greatly, and stolen guns stolen from cars. Go ahead, Bill.
The interesting thing is that when Amy Wyrick, the District Attorney General, was on this show, and we were talking about the interstate shootings, one of the things she said is one of the reasons that Bill Lee gave for pushing this legislation, and that is that no, the problem really doesn't start with people carrying guns in their cars. The problem starts with people breaking into the cars and taking the guns. And she advocates stiffer sentences for those kind of car break-ins. And that's a part of the governor's logic on this bill.
Right. They did increase the penalties for illegal possession of a gun. To clarify, I believe a felon still is not allowed to have a gun. I got a little confused. There were a lot of Republicans saying that, well, mentally ill people couldn't have a gun because that's not allowed. I'm not sure where the checks are in that, and I should have researched that better. Let me also say that we did a number of criminal justice shows lately, which are on WKNO.org and podcasts on thedailymemphian.com. Your thoughts, Karanja, on where we're going? And one more clarification: the bill has passed through a key Senate committee. I think 7-2 on a partisan vote. Two Memphis Democrats voted against it. It was Republicans who voted for it. Go ahead.
Well, the law enforcement notwithstanding, I mean, we still have a supermajority here in Tennessee, and with all those Republicans on stage with Mr. Lee when he brought it out, I didn't pick up any large opposition from the Republicans, so it looks as though it's going to go through. I mean, I think he said that this would put Tennessee in line with like 16 other states that have similar type of provisions. But I'd like to know what those states are, when those provisions came in, and just what has been the results relative to their use of that type of law.
And I should say, Sam Stockard, who covers the legislature for us and the State House, has said that locally on the House side, two Republicans, Coley and Mark White, have signaled they're opposed to this. So far there is not, universal Republican support for it. But like you said, there's a super majority up there, and this is one the governor's been very much behind.
But I'll just say that, I have very little gun experience, absolutely no gun training. You don't want me to go out and get a gun and just start carrying that thing around.
I definitely don't want.
Like you don't want a
to go get
16-year-old, just driving a car. Trust
Yeah.
me, you don't want it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting rural versus city
Sure.
debate and suburban versus city debate in terms of the gun violence that the cities experience. So it'll be very important to see where that goes. Let's stay with the state. There is so much going on. Again, as I said at the top, other bills that you, I think you had flagged a few of them, Toby.
Well, there was a really interesting one that came that had some material and real meaning in Shelby County. About 2 weeks ago, a bill was filed that would really strip local governments authority to deny well drilling permits. And this sounds really in the weeds, but it gets down to Shelby County where we've got the Memphis Sand Aquifer and who can and who can't drill a well here. We know that there are toxins that could leak in there, and there's been a lot of protections, protect our aquifer and the Sierra Club to really protect our water here. Somewhere along the way, Dolores Gresham, who's a Republican from Somerville, Bolivar, I can't remember, I'm sorry. Fayette County, thank you. Filed this bill that would strip these rights, and it was aimed at Shelby County. She said in a committee meeting this week, she said, she got with the Farm Bureau, and I'm not really exactly sure where the bill came from, but she really wanted to maintain groundwater rights for people, farmers that own land that want to drill a well. And so she threatened the bill, but she removed it off notice on Wednesday, saying that the Shelby County Health Department that has the authority over these well permits agreed to some reforms to that. And so she's taking it off notice, and I guess we'll just wait and see what new reforms come.
It has seemed that locally, most politicians, most of the governmental bodies have been very much, once it became clear that there were questions, that you could kind of drill a hole into the aquifer anytime you wanted, and there were questions about what TVA was doing and some dangerous chemicals that might be seeping into the aquifer. It seemed like locally, people were, if not universally, but very much in favor of business community. I think the chamber came forward and said, no, we got to restrict this. The aquifer is an incredible resource for us. So it is, I think, probably for most local people a little bit frustrating when the state comes in and tries to overrule what we're trying to do.
Well, and environmental folks would say too, what would stop a Nestle corporation from coming in, drilling a hole in the aquifer and just
and draining it, and
as much as they want, right?
Let's stay with the state and go to you, Laura. You cover education mostly locally, but obviously so much happens at the state level that funnels down to the local schools. What so far have you flagged as important bills or initiatives that are going on there?
Well, one of the ones that has been really interesting to watch has been about the governor and the education commissioner, Penny Schwinn, overhauling reading instruction in the state. It's pretty well known that Tennessee school children in third grade, it's hovering right around 30% that are passing or on track or mastery in the state standardized test. And so one of the ways that they're trying to bolster that is to have more diagnostic tools that would be, imposed from the state to kind of have some checks and balances on what districts are teaching in schools. But part of the pushback that districts are having is, we have been working with you to come up with different strategies, and some of us have, put in money to have different diagnostic tools, curriculums, and to be able to say we're just going to start over has monetary, implications, has implications for teachers relearning new tools right after learning something new just recently, and that's a big source of frustration for educators who are fatigued of new initiatives.
So Bill, you and I have been doing the show coming up on 10 years, and I'm having flashbacks as Laura speaks. It seems like we've had this conversation and talked about this, a whole new strategy for X. Whether it was TN Ready, or that was testing, or it was Common Core, or it was the successor to Common Core, and it was, and I don't mean to be cynical about it, but it is kind of, it's a little, well, maybe I am cynical about it. Honestly, because it's just so, just constant re-experimentation. It takes a long time to implement. It takes a long time and a lot of money to buy, books and training materials and train the teachers. And, I don't think anyone thinks that the schools have enough money locally. Maybe some do. And then they constantly get reset.
Yeah, and they get reset usually about the time you set a baseline and get a few years worth of data, and then everything changes again, and it seems really circular at times. But I do think that we are at a point after about 10 years of change in one direction. It's now like a tossed salad. Everything is up in the air, and everything's being questioned, and being questioned at a very basic level. The governor has made reference in his State of the State address to the curriculum that Laura talked about here, especially an emphasis on phonics, which is a very controversial topic with educators. How that's taught, should it be taught, are there better ways to get third graders reading at grade level? And for the last decade, much of what has happened in the classroom, not the political stuff, but in the classroom, has been aimed at that third grade reading level and being at that in the third grade.
And again, I want to kind of try to mitigate some of my cynicism and say, I mean, there obviously something's got to change. I mean, I'll bring Karanja in here. I mean, particularly in the cities, but also in the rural areas. I mean, a lot of kids aren't reading. It's not working for a lot of kids. We have, not a great education. So maybe they do need to, maybe I'm completely wrong, and they do need to constantly experiment and change and be open to changing, given that for so many kids and so many families, the school systems across the state aren't working.
Well, I think whatever process that you're following, we need to make sure that we're measuring it well so we'll know whether or not we need to change or not. That's one of my big concerns. Meanwhile, the backdrop is that you're born poor here, and the likelihood of you staying there or moving up very, very much from a child standpoint is really low. And so education is a really super priority. We've got to, it seems to me, get to the point where we can start having some deeper conversations about it. We come in with the idea we're going to change this system around, but do we really know what the baseline issue is? Why aren't children learning to read? Why aren't they doing better? And it seems like when you've been going a particular way a long time and you've tried a lot of different things, you ought to maybe step over to the right and say, well, hey, is there anything over here in the weeds that maybe we just didn't look at, and take a fresh look at things.
Yeah, and two things to follow up with that. Part of what this initiative is being framed as is the science of reading, getting back to the debate between focusing on phonics or other methods that aren't explicitly teaching phonics as a way to not stifle a kid's love of reading. But what the science says is that only a third of children really learn that way, and to be able to expand that to to see more than what we're seeing, to be able that the explicit phonics is kind of what the debate is about. And also, when talking about the test, I'm glad you mentioned about measuring. There is a nuance to this debate of teachers talking about, well, is TN Ready really, when we talk about those proficiency numbers in tests, are we really measuring reading when there's also writing components in it? And is it really testing what teachers are teaching in the classroom, or does that test match what's happening in the classroom? So there's that part of the debate too, of can we even trust that number to really have an accurate reflection of what's happening?
And there are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake here, if not a billion. I mean, there's a huge amount of state funding that goes into education statewide. Mm-hmm. Let's stay with education. Is there an update? The ASD, the Achievement School District, which took over ultimately about 30 schools in Shelby County, is it still being dissolved, and there's going to be some sort of transition from the ASD to a new program for these low-performing schools? Where does that stand?
Yeah, so I guess it was about in January was when they announced that they wanted to be able to phase out the current schools that are in the ASD, but still keep the ASD in as a kind of final hammer, as a threat to local districts if they don't improve, but also acknowledging what we did before isn't working, so we need to transition them out. But where they actually go is still up for debate. There was some assumption that they would just go straight back to Shelby County Schools as directly managed by the district, but then there was also an assumption that those charter schools those organizations that run the charter schools would be able to keep control of them even if they weren't under the state necessarily. Right. To
clarify, not to interrupt you, clarify, there's so many different pieces and so on. There are many charter schools in Shelby County that have nothing to do with the Achievement School District. These are the charter schools that are under that ASD, Achievement School District umbrella of the lowest performing schools.
Yes, and so so kind of what will happen to them is still up for debate. And then there's 3 or 4 schools that are directly run by the state that aren't under charter schools, and so there's just a lot still to be determined.
Let's get back local. There's proposal for a new high school in Fraser. Right, Bill?
Right, and it's a proposal from Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris as part of his State of the County address. He said, why not plant our flag in Fraser with a new high school? And he said this at Collierville High School, a recently opened high school that's kind of a mega high school, more than $90 million the Collierville school system spent on that for 3,000 students. So he said, why don't we do that in Fraser, do a $50 million school? And it's a really interesting concept because there aren't a lot of details about it now, but it seems as if it would be one high school in Fraser. You have 2 in Fraser now, MLK Prep, which is a charter school that's part of the ASD, and you have Tresvant High School, which is an I-Zone, Innovation Zone school with the school system. And this has gotten kind of a cool reception from the Shelby County school system.
Cool in a cold way.
Cool in a cold way, yeah. And Laura would know more about that.
Sure. So part of what the pushback was from Shelby County Schools was as they are creating a new facilities plan that takes in more academic needs and kind of trying to figure out a plan for the whole city. Their early estimates of what they wanted for a high school was about $89 million, which is very close to what the Collierville school cost. But then you're also talking about Fraser, which is not a growing community and has maybe a third of those students compared to Collierville, but the principle behind it being from Shelby County Schools saying, we want to have that kind of Taj Mahal in Fraser, why not? So that's kind of where the tussle is and the tension is.
Speaking of spending, budget season has begun both for the city of Memphis and for Shelby County, and Shelby County has had a relatively, I don't know, they've been sort of under the radar maybe, Bill, on spending, but they are now, they have a relatively new, well, Lee Harris is in, they have a newer finance CFO, finance director, and she pointed out at a recent commission meeting that the county has been overspending for many years in a row now, $5, $6, $7 million a year since 2014. And if I read right, right now they're looking at a $80+ million shortfall they're early in the budget season, but they've got to make some hard choices.
It's $85 million, but the big caveat on that, it's $85 million, and that includes the ask of everyone, including all of the elected officials who are independent of the county administration, your court clerks, the sheriff, the trustee, all of those people. And that's kind of consistent. I don't know that it's always been at $85 million, but the administration is not to the point yet where it's whittling that down and saying, well, this is what we're going to recommend.
Right. And we had people talking about some of this. I think it was Reginald Milton, who county commissioner, who talked about there just needs, and others talked about a need to adjustments to the tax rate based on incorrect property tax projections.
That tax adjustment means tax hike.
Yeah, that's right.
Just in case anyone out there is wondering, that's what it means.
But he's saying that it was at the wrong rate, right, from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, and that you need to make an adjustment. But so you're right; they have been pared down from the original request and everything like that. And then this whole idea about the school is in that same context. It's $50 million for the school, but you've got to have things in the school. You got to have all the technology, as Mr. Ray says. How much is that going to cost? To his credit, Mr. Harris does say that it's the beginning of our conversation, one that we've sort of danced around for a long time.
It is interesting, though, that after years since the suburban school systems were formed, basically what's happened is the county funding has to be distributed based on average daily attendance. How many kids are in the school system? That's a rough description of it. And the way that has worked is that Shelby County Schools makes their ask, gets whatever they get, and then the county computes, okay, this is what the suburban school systems get. It's roughly a 70-30 split that you're talking about. If there is $50 million for a new Fraser High School for Shelby County Schools, though, then it becomes okay.
Right.
What's the 30% for the suburban schools here? So it kind of changes up that the way that's operated.
And usually how it ends up working is that, at least in the county commission meetings I've been to, it's the only school system that usually comes to those meetings is Shelby County Schools, because whatever they get, the windfall because of the attendance, usually is a benefit to the municipal school district. So they don't really, haven't seen, the need to kind of come and advocate because they benefit from it.
The other 6 are in their offices with the calculator adding up.
Right.
Briefly, we'll stay with spending at the city level now, and the sales tax increase that was approved by the voters for ostensibly the terminology of the referendum was to restore the benefits for fire and police. As many city council people and even the mayor has pointed out, they're not bound by that language. They make the spending decisions. But right now there seems to be a general direction, if I'm not mistaken, Bill, that they are going to put that sales tax increase money towards restoring the benefits. But it's a very complicated formula.
It is, and Mayor Jim Strickland will have his final plan on April 21st when he presents his city budget proposal to the Memphis City Council. But he came and talked to the council members this week. There will be more discussions about this. His take is basically the city is going to restore the benefits to police and firefighters that it cut in 2014. And if there is any overage, if there's any money left over after they do that, instead of using it for pre-kindergarten or for road paving, which
was in the referendum language,
which was in the referendum language, the mayor says that his inclination is to use that for retention and recruitment incentive bonuses for police and firefighters, and for fixing up fire stations across the city, and for take-home cars for the police.
What is a take-home car? I'm sorry, I cut you off. So if people didn't hear, the mayor advocated for take-home cars for police. What is that?
It's someone who is on call who uses that car. They drive it home. If they get called out, then they just come in that car.
It's a company car. It's a more efficient way. You can respond from right where you are.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's what he wants to use the overage for. He also has a better estimate of how this all works out. On this program, he said initially that he believed that the sales tax revenue would fund the restoration of the benefits for the first few years.
And then he has a shortfall.
Yeah, he has better figures now that suggest it is more like 15 to 17 years that the sales tax revenue will cover restoring these benefits.
Well, that estimate may be before the impact of the convolutions in markets and economy with coronavirus, but that's a short-term thing, so I don't want to be sky is falling about that. One of the concerns Strickland had, and I'll maybe go to you, Kronzer, he's concerned that if they restore those benefits, some 600 police and fire, I think it's mostly police, would then suddenly be eligible for early retirement, so the retention money is partly to mitigate that. Right. They've been trying to increase the police officers to something like 2,300 to 2,500 and made a little bit of progress on that. Thoughts?
Well, those are the facts as I know them. I think they stand at 2,100 in terms of the police complement now. They're trying to get to like 2,300 by 2020. And we'll see whether they get there, but there's always the argument of whether or not more police officers is the answer to reducing crime in the first place.
Yeah, and we've done, as I mentioned, a ton of shows on those questions, including a number of things that Bill has referenced that are on WKNO.org and podcast versions on Daily Memphian. With just a couple minutes left, I mentioned the election quickly. We won't go into Super Tuesday. Everybody's heard all that stuff. It was interesting that Tennessee had more of at least on the Democratic side, had more impact and mattered more in a way that sometimes we really don't. However, there is a runoff race. Real quickly, what happens next?
Yes. Along with the presidential primaries, you had primaries, Republican and Democrat, for General Sessions Court clerk. The winners of those meet on the August 6th ballot. It's the only countywide office on the ballot. And the winners are, for the Democrats, former City Council member Joe Brown, and for the Republicans, former probate court clerk Paul Boyd.
And the election for them is
In August.
in August. Then there are more elections through August leading up to the national election.
Right. Also on the August ballot, you will have nonpartisan races for Shelby County schools. You will have state and federal primaries, the Tennessee legislature, all 14 of the state House seats, 3 of the 5 state Senate seats. You will have a statewide primary for United States Senate, and you will have primaries for United States Congress.
Okay. With a minute left, Toby, y'all are doing a cover story at the Flyer on craft beer.
Yes, this week is all about craft beer at the Memphis Flyer. It sounds like a ton of fun, but I dug into craft beer last week, and I can report there's tons of beer news out there. Ghost River was just recently purchased by an outside investor group. They're making positive changes over there. You're going to see a lot of overhaul there. We're going to have new locations of Wiseacre Brewing, Memphis Made Brewing, both downtown. We're going to have a brand new brewery, Grind City, in the Uptown area. We're going to have another Soul and Spirits that's going to be here. Lots of other fun craft beer stuff that's going to happen all over town. It's going to get deeper and crazier. It's going to be great. So look for it next year.
And as it comes full circle to the water, we did a craft beer show years ago in the summer. There wasn't a lot else going on, but it was one of my favorite shows. We didn't drink beer, but we talked about it. And the water, the aquifer, that is an incredible resource for any kind of distiller or craft beer or all those things, because the water is so pure and important. That is all the time we have this week. Join us again next week, but you can get this show and all of the shows. Video of it is on WKNO.org. Just search for Behind the Headlines, or you can get podcasts of the show on dailymemphian.com, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. See you next week.